Let me tell you about the word hunt. The entire galactic incident you just witnessed, the security team, the near arrest, the sheer panic in that classroom, all of it hinged on a single verb. One simple word with a couple of letters. That's all it took to derail an entire afternoon and almost start an interstellar incident. The Universal's translators did their job. They rendered the sound accurately. They just couldn't translate the cultural bedrock underneath it. In one culture, it means to track and kill living prey. The word carries the weight of pursuit, of a struggle, of a life ended. It implies a predator and a victim. It's a word tied to food, to survival, to conquest. It's a verb of action and violence. It's a word that in many advanced societies is a marker of a barbaric past they've worked centuries to move beyond. It's not a word you use in polite company. It's certainly not a word you use in a class on ethical coexistence. In another culture, it means to search for knowledge. It's about the pursuit of understanding, the thrill of the find. It's a word you use for rare books, for bargain antiques, for scientific discovery. It's divorced from violence. It's connected to patience, to skill, to curiosity. It's a peaceful verb, an academic verb. When Jake said he hunted extinct species, he was placing himself in a long line of explorers and scientists. He was talking about a noble, patient search for truth. He was using his language correctly. This story is a masterclass in the danger of assumptions and the power of language. Professor Kelver assumed he knew what the word meant. The class assumed they knew. The security team assumed they were dealing with a clear-cut case. Nobody stopped to ask for a definition. Nobody thought the word needed one. They all heard the sound and mapped it onto their own understanding. They filled in the gaps with their own fears and histories. They didn't hear what Jake said. They heard what they expected him to say. It shows how the stories we tell about ourselves can sound like nightmares to others. Jake told a story about bonding with his father, about family trips, about the wonder of discovery. He painted a picture of his childhood that was warm and positive. He shared his personal history. They heard a confession. They heard a generational legacy of violence. They heard a proud account of systematic destruction. His nostalgia was their horror story. His photo album was their evidence file. It proves that the most advanced civilization can be brought to a halt by a vocabulary quiz. All the tech, the diplomacy, the protocols, the years of building a peaceful interstellar community, none of it mattered. The whole intricate system crashed because of a difference in dictionary definitions, a misunderstanding that would be funny if it weren't so terrifying. The galaxy's delicate peace almost shattered over a semantic argument. The grand payoff for the entire journey is the realization that curiosity, not malice, was the driving force. The security officers came in looking for a monster. They left baffled by a nerd. The intent they were primed to find, the evil they were ready to confront, simply wasn't there. It was just a guy who really likes old bones. The shadow they were fighting was just a shadow. The reality was far more strange and far less dangerous. Fear turned into fascination because someone finally asked for a definition. The entire mood of the room pivoted on that one moment. The officer's brow furrowed. He asked a clarifying question. He stopped assuming and started investigating. He moved from, "What did you do?" to, "What do you mean by what you did?" That tiny shift in questioning changed everything. It was the key that unlocked the whole misunderstanding. The hero's journey wasn't about saving the galaxy. It was about almost destroying it with a dictionary error. There were no epic space battles, no last-minute diplomatic miracles. The crisis was averted because someone double-checked the meaning of a word. The villain wasn't an empire or a monster. It was the assumption. A lazy, easy, understandable assumption that nearly broke the world. And in the end, that's a much more human story. It's not about grand heroes and evil villains. It's about people talking past each other. It's about the gaps between what we say and what they hear. It's a story that could happen to anyone who's ever tried to explain themselves and been completely misunderstood. The scale was galactic, but the problem was painfully, familiarly small. So the next time you're in a cross-cultural conversation, maybe lead with definitions. Let's just say it saves everyone a lot of trouble. The galaxy is full of stories waiting to be misunderstood, and heroes waiting to accidentally cause an interstellar incident. It's a big, weird place out there, and most of the conflicts don't start with weapons. They start with a word that meant one thing to you and something else entirely to them. Stay curious, but for goodness sake, be specific. A little precision prevents a lot of paperwork, and a lot of panic. Then Jake pulls out his photos. The mood plummets. He takes out a standard issue data slate. the kind every student uses for coursework. He taps the screen, pulling up his personal gallery. He's smiling. He thinks he's about to share some vacation snaps, a visual aid to his story. He doesn't see the way the security officers stiffen. He doesn't notice how Professor Kelver takes a half step back from the lectern. The air in the room, already tense, gets heavier. The lead officer asks Jake to explain the images, treating them as incriminating evidence. His voice is flat, controlled. He points to the first picture. He asks who took the photo, what the location was, what the date was. Standard investigation procedure. He's building a timeline. He's establishing facts for a report that will be read by judges and diplomats. He is not making small talk. The officers see a sentient being proudly posing with the remains of its victims. In the first image, Jake is grinning. His arm slung casually around the neck vertebra of a creature so large the bone is taller than he is. The sun is bright. He's wearing a hat. He looks happy, relaxed, like someone on a successful holiday. To the officers, it's a trophy shot. A hunter with his kill. The scale of the bone suggests a creature of immense size and power, which only makes the act of killing it seem more monstrous. One image shows Jake, grinning, next to a massive, bizarrely shaped pile of bones. The bones are jumbled together, a chaotic heap of white shapes against reddish-brown earth. To Jake, it's a fantastic find. A bone bed. A paleontologist's dream. To the security team, it's a mass grave. They see careless disposal. They see a complete lack of respect for the deceased. The sheer number of individuals in one place suggests industrial-scale slaughter. They see proof of systematic extermination, not a single hunt. Another shows him at a vast, dusty excavation site, holding specialized tools. He's got a small, precise brush in one hand and a pick in the other. He's covered in dirt, squinting against the sun. He looks like a worker at a difficult job site. The aliens see weapons and body disposal tools. The pick looks like a tool for breaking bone. The brush looks like something used to clean evidence. The vast, torn-up landscape looks like a site where something terrible was buried and is now being dug up. They see proof of a cover-up. A meticulous scientific effort to hide the evidence of a crime. The officer's questions are careful, legalistic, designed to trap him. They ask about the purpose of the tools. They ask about the number of individuals at the site. They ask if he was alone. Every question is phrased to elicit a detail that will confirm their hypothesis. They are not trying to understand his hobby. They are building a case. Jake's answers are enthusiastic, detailed, and completely missing the subtext. He explains the brush is for gently removing sediment from fragile bone. He talks about the pick being for breaking through hard rock, not bone. He describes the bone bed as a lucky discovery, a snapshot of a prehistoric event. He talks about the team of researchers with him, their specialties, their excitement. He is providing a perfect, innocent explanation for every single piece of their damning visual evidence, and he is doing it with the upbeat energy of a tour guide. The gap in understanding has never been wider or more dangerous. The officers hear his words, but they filter them through their own terrifying conclusions. His description of a careful excavation sounds like a forensics team working a crime scene. His talk of a research team sounds like a well-organized operational unit. They are speaking the same language but having two entirely different conversations. One is about science and discovery. The other is about atrocity and justice. And neither side has any idea the other exists. The data slate in Jake's hand might as well be displaying two completely different sets of images. You can see the moment one officer's brow furrows. It's a subtle shift. His professional mask of neutral interrogation slips for just a second. His forehead creases. His eyes, which had been scanning Jake for tells, now look slightly unfocused, like he's working through a difficult math problem in his head. Something isn't adding up. The pieces he's collecting aren't forming the picture he expected. The evidence is all there, but the story it's telling is starting to fracture. The lead officer holds up a photo of Jake at an excavation site. It's one of the more dramatic shots. Jake is standing in a deep, carefully dug trench surrounded by tools and markers. The officer's voice is still level, still doing the job. He asks the next logical question in the sequence. The question designed to confirm the nature of the event. Can you explain what happened to the creature you discovered here? He uses the word creature deliberately. He uses happened to as a neutral term that could mean anything from killed to processed. He's leaving the door open for a confession. He's giving Jake the rope. Jake doesn't say killed. The word doesn't even cross his mind. He doesn't talk about weapons or traps or a struggle. He starts talking about excavation techniques. His tone shifts from storyteller to instructor. He's in his element now. He points at the image, his finger tracing the outlines of the trench. He gets that focused look people get when they're explaining their passion. He uses words like brushing sediment and preserving the structure. He describes the delicate process of exposing bone without damaging it. He talks about the different types of brushes, stiff ones for heavy dirt, soft ones for fragile surfaces. He mentions using dental picks for the most precise work. He explains how they map the site with grids and photographs before they remove anything. It's a detailed technical explanation. It's a lecture on methodology. He describes a workflow, but it's a preservation workflow, not a hunting one. There's no mention of pursuit. No talk of a kill. The entire process he outlines is about recovery and care. It's about uncovering something that's already long gone and treating it with respect. The goal isn't to end a life. The goal is to understand one that ended millions of years ago. The verbs are all wrong. They're the verbs of a scientist, not a hunter. The officer's posture changes from interrogator to confused investigator. The rigid, authoritative stance softens. He leans forward slightly, his head tilted. He's not trying to trap Jake anymore. He's trying to understand him. The script he's been following, the one for questioning a suspect in a major crimes investigation, no longer applies. This doesn't sound like a crime. It sounds like a very complicated, very dusty job. The other officers exchange glances. A quick, silent communication passes between them. The energy in the room shifts. The grim certainty evaporates. It's replaced by a spreading confusion. The script is flipping. They are no longer building a case. They are dismantling a misunderstanding. This is the critical pivot, the dawning realization that the verbs are all wrong. They came into this room prepared for one story, a story about hunting, killing, and displaying victims. They were ready for a confession to murder on a massive scale. They were mentally preparing the forms for an interstellar arrest. Instead, they're getting a lecture on archaeology. They came for a monster and found a graduate student. The floor of their reality just dropped out from under them. Then Jake drops the word that changes everything. Fossils. The officers press for clarification on the nature of these creatures. They need to understand what they are looking at. The lead officer holds up the data slate again, pointing to a clear image of a massive serrated tooth embedded in rock. He asks what it is. He uses the word specimen, leaving it open. He's trying to fit this new information into the old framework. But the framework is breaking. Jake, puzzled, explains fossils are rock formations that preserve the shape of original bones. He says it like it's the most basic fact in the universe. Like everyone knows this. He doesn't understand why they look so confused. He elaborates, using his hands to demonstrate. He talks about minerals replacing organic material over millions of years. He describes the process of permineralization, how water seeps into the pores of bone, leaving behind stone copies. He's giving a Geology 101 lecture to a room full of galactic law enforcement. The room tilts. Rock formations. The words hang in the air, simple and devastating. The security officers look at the images on the slate again. The massive skeletal structures. The jumbled piles of bone. They aren't looking at the remains of recently killed beings. They are looking at stone. They are looking at geology. The shape is there. The form is perfect, but the substance is entirely different. It's not a corpse. It's a statue of a corpse made by time itself. He's not talking about life. He never was. The entire conversation from the very beginning has been a monumental miscommunication. He's been talking about geology. He's been talking about stone. The horror in the room begins to curdle into a different kind of shock. The adrenaline of a criminal investigation is still there, but it has nowhere to go. The fear and revulsion they felt moments ago have been rendered obsolete. They are left feeling foolish, off balance, and profoundly confused. The scale of the misunderstanding starts to become visible, and it's astronomical. This isn't a small error in translation. This is a chasm in fundamental concepts. Their civilization views extinction as a moral event, a failure that happens in a lifetime, something to be mourned and atoned for. His views it as a geological fact, a slow, inevitable process measured in eras, not years. They thought he was confessing to murder. He was giving a report on natural history. The payoff is the gut-punch revelation that reframes extinction from an ethical failure to a geological fact. The tension that has been building for the last hour dissolves not with a bang, but with a quiet dawning horror of a different kind. The horror of realizing you almost arrested a student for being interested in rocks. The officers look at each other. The grim set of their shoulders relaxes. The professional interrogator masks slip completely, replaced by pure, unadulterated bewilderment. The officers are no longer looking at a genocidal maniac. The suspect has vanished. In his place is a nerd. A very, very enthusiastic nerd who has detailed opinions on sedimentary layers and mineral composition. He's looking at them with bright, eager eyes, waiting for the next question about his fascinating field of study. He is completely in his element. He has no idea he was just accused of genocide. He thinks he's finally found a captivated audience for his passion project. He smiles, encouraged by their attentive silence. He starts to ask if they'd like to see more photos, maybe some of the better preserved specimens from the late Cretaceous period. He's ready to dive deeper. The security officers just stare. They have to go back to their headquarters and write a report explaining how they confused a paleontology enthusiast with a mass murderer. The paperwork for this is going to be humiliating. The case file will be a permanent monument to a truly galactic-scale misunderstanding. Jake, oblivious, is already pulling up a slideshow. Jake, now in his element, starts talking about geological timescales. He sees the lingering confusion on the officers' faces and decides to clarify. He wants to make sure they understand the timeline of his work. He thinks their puzzled looks mean they're interested in the scientific challenges. He has no idea their confusion is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of what he's even describing. He leans forward, ready to explain the complexities of his field. He tries to clarify the timeline of his hunts, seeing their confusion. He holds up a hand, a professor preparing to make a careful point. He knows this part can be tricky for people outside the discipline. He wants to be precise but also acknowledge the limitations of the science. He's being the good academic, careful with his claims. He's about to demonstrate the rigorous methodology behind his conclusions. He says, dating isn't always exact, but the geological markers are pretty reliable. He says it with a slight shrug, an admission of the field's inherent uncertainties. It's a standard disclaimer. He's talking about radiometric dating, about analyzing isotopes and decay rates in rock layers. He's discussing techniques for measuring the passage of millions of years. He's deep in the technical weeds of paleontology. They were thinking of dinner dates. The word dating to them means social engagements, appointments, calendars. They hear him say it's not always exact, and imagine fuzzy records of recent events. They picture him being vague about when he committed these acts. They think he's being evasive about the timing of his crimes. The gap in meaning is a canyon. They are listening to a technical lecture on deep time. They are hearing a suspect being cagey about his schedule. The phrase 65 million years is uttered. Jake says it casually, using it as a common example. He's talking about the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, a well-known marker. It's just a number to him, a standard reference point. It's a fact as basic as saying water is wet. He doesn't pause. He doesn't emphasize it. He just weaves it into his explanation of stratigraphy and fossil correlation. The room gets very still. The number doesn't compute at first. It just hangs there, absurd and impossible. Then it starts to sink in. 65 million years. The words aren't just numbers. They are a measurement of time so vast it defies their lived experience. Their civilizations track history in millennia, at most. For most of them, a million years is an abstract concept, a unit for astrophysics, not biology. This isn't a recent tragedy. This is primordial history. The aliens are doing the math. 47 species, millions of years. They are multiplying the scale of the misunderstanding. Each of those 47 hunts didn't happen last week. They happened in epochs they can barely conceptualize. The time frames involved are so enormous that the idea of hunting these creatures in the present tense is ludicrous. It would be like boasting about hunting stars that died before your planet formed. They weren't hunting living beings. The realization is slow and dizzying. The terror they felt, the horror, the images of violence, it was all based on a catastrophic misalignment of tenses. They were investigating murders. He was describing archaeology. They thought they were looking at evidence of a slaughter. They were looking at the study of natural history. The entire premise of the interrogation collapses. The criminal intent evaporates, leaving behind a colossal, embarrassing cultural gap. The officers look at their notes, at their recorders, at each other. The case they were building is nonsense. The suspect is a scholar. The evidence is rock. The crime scene is a dig site. The weapons are brushes and picks. They feel a profound sense of professional foolishness. They came in ready to stop a monster and ended up interrupting a geology lecture. The rug has been pulled out from under the entire interrogation. The ensue atmosphere of a galactic investigation dissolves into awkward silence. The officers have no more questions. Their entire line of inquiry is invalid. They are standing in a classroom, armed with procedure and authority, and they have absolutely nothing to proceed with. The forms they need to fill out don't have boxes for this. The case against Jake Morrison is based on a catastrophic translation error. It wasn't a failure of language, but of context. The universal translators did their job perfectly. They translated the words hunt, trophy, and extinct with precise dictionary accuracy. They just couldn't translate the millions of years of geological time that gave those words their true, harmless meaning. The problem wasn't the vocabulary. It was the calendar. Jake looks at the silent officers waiting for the next question. He wonders if they're impressed by the sheer age of the specimens. You show up to your advanced xenobiology class at Galactic University, thinking it'll be another boring lecture on moral philosophy. Then the professor asks if anyone has real-world experience with extinction events. You casually mention you've hunted 47 extinct species. The entire alien classroom freezes in horror. That's when you realize your definition of hunting might not translate across species. Picture a lecture hall designed by a committee of aliens trying to accommodate 12 different physiologies. The air circulates through 4 separate filtration systems. The seating includes everything from gel-filled immersion tanks to perches strong enough to support silicate life forms. There's even a small moisture-misted zone for the amphibious students. The whole place hums with the sound of climate control and translation tech. It's a masterpiece of cross-cultural engineering, a physical monument to cooperation. Every species has a place. Every body type is accounted for. Professor Kelver stands at the front, his tall frame commanding attention even before he speaks. His skin has the rich texture of purple velvet, and his 4 eyes move independently, scanning the room with calm precision. He begins the day's discussion on ethical coexistence, his voice a measured baritone that the universal translators render with academic clarity. He talks about respect for other forms of life, about interspecies empathy, about learning from historical mistakes. The tone is serious, enlightened, peaceful. It's exactly the kind of lecture you'd expect at the galaxy's most prestigious university. But the room's designers forgot one thing. Human cultural baggage. Sitting toward the back, Jake Morrison sticks out. It's not just his 2 eyes or his lack of natural armor. It's the way he's taking notes. While everyone else uses neural interfaces or holorecorders, he's scribbling in a physical notebook with an actual pen. The scratch of the tip on paper is the only sound not generated by technology. He looks entirely at home, completely unaware of how archaic he appears. He's just a guy in a class trying to keep up. The professor poses a question to the room. He asks if anyone has direct real-world experience with extinction-level events. He means it as a philosophical prompt, a way to discuss preservation ethics or collective grief. The question hangs there, floating in the carefully regulated air. You can feel the weight of it. For most species in the room, extinction is a tragedy, a failure, a ghost that haunts their history. The assumption is that any answer will be somber, reflective, maybe even guilty. This isn't just a class. It's a microcosm of the galaxy's hopeful but fragile peace. A dozen different cultures all trying to be better than their pasts. You can feel the cultural friction just under the surface of all the polite academic language. Everyone is on their best behavior, which means everyone is hiding something. A history of war, a legacy of environmental neglect, a cultural shame. The stage is perfectly set for a conversation that's about to go completely off the rails. Then Jake raises his hand. He doesn't look hesitant or serious. He looks like a student who knows the answer. He decides for once to be completely honest. No filter, no translator check. Just a straightforward human response to a direct question. The galaxy, with all its rules and its careful diplomacy, was not ready for Jake Morrison's idea of a field trip. You know that moment when a room gets so quiet you can hear the hum of the life support systems? The ventilation whirring, the subtle click of a translator resetting, the sound of your own breathing. Professor Kelver calls on Jake, expecting the kind of comment that fits this classroom. Something about memorializing lost species, maybe. A respectful observation about preservation ethics. The professor's four eyes focus on the human student, waiting for the thoughtful contribution that usually comes after such a serious question. Jake doesn't offer a comment. He offers a number, 47. He says it with the casual pride of someone listing their high score in a video game. No hesitation, no sense of gravity, just a fact. Then he adds the verb, hunted. The word lands in the room like a physical object. It doesn't echo. It just sits there, heavy and wrong. For species that measure civilization by their restraint, it's a gut punch. Most of the beings in that room come from cultures where causing a single extinction would be an unforgivable crime. A mark of ultimate barbarism. 47 isn't a number. It's a catastrophe. It's a scale of destruction that doesn't compute. The silence that follows isn't just quiet. It's a void where understanding used to be. Professor Kelver's four eyes blink in a sequence that denotes pure, unadulterated shock. It's a specific pattern his species uses when faced with something incomprehensible. Two eyes close, then the other two, then all four open wide. His velvet skin seems to lose some of its luster. He grips the lectern, his long fingers tightening on the polished surface. The academic detachment he wore like a cloak is gone, replaced by something far more primal. A jellyfish-like student named Zara visibly pales. Her bioluminescence, usually a calm and steady blue, flickers with alarm. The light shifts to a faint, sickly green around her edges. Her tentacles, which had been floating serenely in her hydration tank, go completely still. She looks less like a scholar and more like a creature caught in a predator's gaze. The horror isn't abstract for her. It's a physical reaction. This is the hook, the initial visceral shock that redefines the entire conversation. The lecture on ethical coexistence, with its carefully prepared slides and its philosophical underpinnings, is over. It's been replaced by a single stark data point that contradicts everything the class was supposed to be about. The professor's lesson plan is now irrelevant. The classroom dynamic has shifted from theoretical discussion to concrete, awful reality. No one moves. The reptilian student Borg has stopped his constant, subtle fidgeting. His scales are pressed flat against his body, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The silicate being in the corner has gone so still it looks like a statue again. The only movement is the slow, distressed pulsing of Zara's light. The air feels thicker, harder to breathe, even with the perfect filtration systems. Jake just sits there. He doesn't seem to notice the effect his words have had. He might even look a little pleased to have contributed. He's answered the question honestly from his frame of reference. He has no idea that in the space of 5 seconds, he has gone from being the odd human with the notebook to the most terrifying person in the room. The case study nobody asked for has just introduced himself. I mean, the guy isn't even whispering. He's just talking about his childhood. He's leaning back in his chair, relaxed, while the rest of the room is frozen solid. The aliens are trying to process the scale of 47 distinct extinctions. For most of them, losing one species was a planetary trauma that required generations of mourning and legal reform. 47 isn't a number. It's an apocalypse. It's a systematic eradication that suggests a culture built on annihilation. Jake's tone is the real problem. It's conversational, oblivious. He doesn't lower his voice. He doesn't seem to sense the horror radiating from his classmates. He just starts explaining like he's telling a story at a party. He talks about family traditions. He mentions learning to track as a kid, how his dad would take him out on weekends. To him, it's a story about bonding, a nostalgic memory of time spent with a parent, a normal part of growing up. To them, it's a generational horror story. They hear the phrase family tradition and imagine a bloodline dedicated to destruction. They picture children being taught to hunt before they can read. The concept of passing down these skills through generations implies a deep, cultural commitment to the practice. It's not a hobby. It's a legacy of death on a scale they can barely comprehend. He mentions trophy rooms. The words are innocent in his mouth. He talks about them like they're rec rooms or libraries, places to show off achievements. To the aliens, they hear evidence lockers. They imagine chambers filled with the remains of victims, cataloged and displayed as prizes. It suggests a meticulous record-keeping of conquests, a cold, clinical pride in the act of eradication. It turns the horror into a system, a bureaucracy of extinction. He talks about hunting partners. He uses the word like it means buddies or colleagues, people you share a common interest with. The aliens imagine a genocidal network, a web of individuals coordinating their efforts to wipe out life forms. It implies organization, communication, a shared purpose that makes the scale of 47 seem not just possible, but efficient. They don't hear friends, they hear co-conspirators. His human cultural framework is a brick wall the alien perspective keeps crashing into. Every word he says is filtered through their own experiences, their own histories. Their frameworks are built on caution, on preservation, on the collective guilt of past mistakes. His is built on something else entirely, something they can't map onto their own understanding of morality and civilization. The moral ambiguity here isn't in his actions. He's not describing anything he thinks is wrong. The chasm is between his intent and their perception. He thinks he's sharing a wholesome story about his family. They think he's confessing to crimes against existence itself. He's smiling slightly, remembering a good time. They are watching him, waiting for the moment he reveals this is all some terrible joke. You realize this isn't a debate. There's no argument to be had. It's a collision of two realities, two completely different ways of seeing the universe and a person's place in it. The classroom is no longer a place of learning. It's a border between two worlds that just discovered they speak different moral languages. And Jake is just sitting there chatting away in his native tongue, completely unaware that he's causing a diplomatic crisis. Then he brings up the Stegosaurus. Of course he brings up the Stegosaurus. Jake, trying to be helpful, decides to elaborate on his family's involvement. He thinks he's providing context. He wants them to understand the scope. He doesn't see the terror in their eyes. He sees curiosity, or what he mistakes for curiosity. He leans forward, his notebook forgotten. He's in storyteller mode now. He describes a full skeleton mounted in his living room. He talks about it like it's a piece of art. He mentions the careful placement near the fireplace, how the light from the flames plays off the fossilized bone. He calls it a trophy. The word is casual, proud. He means it as a sign of a successful expedition, a difficult find, a testament to patience and skill. The aliens hear war trophy. They don't hear fossil. They imagine the skeleton of a recently killed sentient being, polished and displayed as a conquest. A monument to a hunt. The concept is so barbaric, so antithetical to everything their cultures stand for, that it sucks the remaining air from the room. A trophy isn't a keepsake. It's proof. He talks about tracking extinct species. He uses the word tracking with the same ease as before. He doesn't understand their definition of extinct implies a recent preventable loss, a failure of stewardship, a crime. For them, extinction is a current event, a tragedy that happened on their watch. They don't have a category for extinction as a historical geological fact. They hear that he hunted things his own people drove to extinction. It layers the horror. It suggests a culture that destroys and then hunts the remnants for sport. Borg, the reptilian student, begins to tremble. His scales, usually lying smooth and quiet against his skin, start to rattle. It's a soft, dry sound like pebbles shaking in a can. It's an involuntary reaction his species hasn't needed in centuries. A primal response to a perceived apex predator, a sign of pure instinctual fear. He doesn't look at Jake anymore. He stares at the floor, his body vibrating with a low-frequency dread. Zara's blue chromatophores stand on end. Her smooth, gelatinous skin pricks with tiny points of light, a defensive reaction that makes her look like a startled deep-sea creature. It's a physiological response her people evolved to appear larger and more threatening to predators. A reflex buried so deep in their genetics they thought it was obsolete. Her bioluminescence flickers erratically, casting nervous shadows across her tank. She is, for the first time in her life, genuinely afraid of another student. The classroom's tough but hopeful vibe shatters completely. The careful atmosphere of interspecies cooperation, the fragile peace built on mutual respect and shared academic purpose, is gone. It's replaced by an escalating silent anxiety. The ethical tension is no longer theoretical. It's a physical presence in the room. It's in the rattling of Borg's scales. It's in the frantic lighting on Zara's skin. It's in the way every other student has gone preternaturally still, afraid any movement might draw attention. Professor Kelver's lesson plan is in ashes. His carefully prepared notes on moral philosophy and ethical coexistence are useless. He's not guiding a discussion anymore. He's presiding over a crime scene. His 4 eyes are wide, unmoving. He looks from Jake's open, earnest face to the terrified reactions of his other students. The chasm between these two understandings of the universe is now a mile wide and bottomless. He has no bridge to throw across it. He just stands there watching his class come apart. So Professor Kelver does the only thing he thinks he can do. He calls security. His hand trembles slightly as he presses the emergency alert button under his lectern. It's a silent alarm, one he never thought he'd use outside of a drill. Kelver, a scholar who built his career on coexistence, is now contemplating the unthinkable. Legal action. He looks at Jake, who is still sitting there with that open, earnest expression, and feels a profound sense of failure. His entire academic framework, his belief in dialogue and understanding, has just hit a wall it can't scale. The phrase war crimes is muttered. It comes from Borg, the reptilian student, his voice a dry hiss. Then genocidal network. The words hang in the air, formal and heavy. They're not accusations thrown in anger. They're clinical terms, diagnoses. They transform the room completely. The exam hall morphs into a courtroom without a single change to the furniture. The desks become witness stands. The lectern becomes a judge's bench. The air of academic inquiry is replaced by the grim atmosphere of an investigation. Galactic security officers arrive within seconds. 2 of them. Their uniforms are a stark functional gray, a sharp contrast to the colorful variety of the student body. Their posture shifts immediately to investigation mode. They don't rush in. They step inside, their eyes scanning the room, assessing threats, categorizing everyone present. Their movements are efficient, practiced. They see a classroom. They process a potential crime scene. Jake's casual remarks are no longer just stories. They are official statements. His anecdotes about family trips are now testimony. The bureaucratic machinery of the galaxy, a vast and ponderous system designed for interstellar disputes and treaty violations, grinds into motion. And it has Jake in its sights. This is the payoff. The moment a cultural misunderstanding ceases to be a philosophical problem and becomes a procedural one. It gets a case file, a tracking number. It enters the system. The officers approach Jake. They don't treat him as a student. They treat him as a suspect. Their tone is neutral, professional, devoid of the warmth Professor Kelver usually employs. They ask clear, direct questions. They avoid leading him. They just want the facts as he understands them. They are listening for a confession, for details that will confirm their worst suspicions. They see a being who has calmly admitted to unimaginable destruction. Jake, ever eager, happily agrees to everything. He's not nervous. He's helpful. He wants to assist with their inquiry. He has no concept of the gravity they attach to his words. When they ask to see his evidence, he brightens up. Finally, someone who wants to see the good stuff. He starts talking about photo archives, about digital collections, about the physical specimens. He's ready to provide access to everything. He thinks he's sharing his passion. They think he's handing over the keys to his armory. The gap between his reality and theirs has never been wider or more dangerous. He's smiling, ready to show them his trophies. They are preparing a chain of custody for evidence. But Jake, trying to reassure them, makes it so much worse. The security officers press him for details on the scale of this operation. They want to understand the scope. They use calm, professional tones, asking about logistics, about methods, about how widespread this activity is. They are building a case. They need to know if this is a lone individual or something larger. They treat him like a suspect in a major investigation, because that's exactly what they think he is. Jake's confidence is a weapon he doesn't know he's wielding. He interprets their serious questions as genuine interest. He's thrilled. Finally, someone who gets it, who wants to know the real details. He doesn't see the grim set of their jaws or the way their hands hover near their standard issue recorders. He sees fellow enthusiasts. He leans in, eager to share. He wants to impress them with the sheer grandeur of it all. He says, museums. There are whole museums dedicated to it. He drops the line like it's the most normal thing in the universe. He says it with a wave of his hand, as if mentioning a chain of restaurants or a popular sport. To him, it's a point of cultural pride. It proves that this isn't some backyard hobby. It's a respected, organized field of study. It's legitimate. It's important, he adds. My uncle works at one, actually. He says it like this proves his legitimacy. Like having a relative in the industry makes it all above board. It's a human thing to do. To establish credibility through personal connection. He's trying to build rapport. He's saying, see? I'm not some amateur. This runs in the family. He smiles. It's a friendly, open smile. To the aliens, this doesn't sound like education. It sounds like institutionalized slaughter. A museum, in their understanding, is a place of remembrance and mourning. A place for lost art or to honor tragedies. The idea of a museum dedicated to the results of hunting, it implies a society that not only commits these acts but celebrates them. It formalizes the horror. It makes it official. It turns a crime into a culture. A museum dedicated to your conquest isn't a museum. It's a monument to atrocity. The officers don't hear a place of learning. They hear a shrine to violence. They imagine vast halls filled with the spoils of systematic eradication, curated and explained by experts. They picture school children on field trips being taught to admire the efficiency of the hunt. The concept is so alien, so chilling, that it fundamentally rewires their understanding of humanity. His attempt to sound normal only cements their fear. Every word he says to make himself seem more respectable just paints a darker picture. His casual tone, his familial pride, his mention of public institutions, it all points to a planet-wide acceptance of this behavior. He isn't describing a personal flaw. He's describing a global ethos, a way of life built on dominance and death. He's providing a roadmap to what they believe is a planet-wide criminal enterprise. He's giving them names, places, structures. He's talking about museums and uncles, and in their minds he's outlining a network of facilities and personnel dedicated to documenting genocide. He's not just a suspect anymore. He's a key witness against his entire species. He's happily offering testimony that could condemn humanity in the eyes of the galactic community. The potential interstellar incident is no longer potential. It's happening. It's unfolding right in this classroom. The security officers are no longer just investigating a student. They are investigating a civilization. They look at Jake, this cheerful, helpful young man, and they see the friendly face of a culture that could wipe out 47 species and build museums to display the evidence. The case file is no longer about one individual. It's about first contact gone horribly, catastrophically wrong. The paperwork for this is going to be a nightmare. Zara looks at Jake differently now. They all do. The immediate drama is over, but the philosophical aftershocks remain. The classroom feels quieter. The air still charged with the energy of a near catastrophe narrowly avoided. The security officers are gone, the recorders are put away, but the silence they left behind is thoughtful, not empty. Everyone is replaying the last hour in their heads, seeing it from a new angle. The panic has subsided, replaced by a slow, dawning comprehension that's somehow more unsettling. The aliens are left to reconcile their horror with the new reality. They spent an hour believing they were in the presence of a monster, a being who represented everything their cultures had worked to move beyond. Now they have to fit the actual Jake into that mental space. The guy with the notebook. The one who gets excited about rock layers. The one who is ready to give a presentation with visual aids. The cognitive dissonance is a physical thing in the room. They have to dismantle their fear and rebuild their understanding from the ground up. Zara hints at a new mutual respect, a dawning comprehension. Her bioluminescence has settled into a calm, steady blue, but the pulses are slower, more thoughtful. She floats in her tank, her tentacles moving in a lazy, contemplative pattern. She's not looking at Jake with fear anymore. She's looking at him with a kind of intense academic curiosity. She's a student of life, and he just presented her with a form of life she never knew existed. She remarks that humans' obsession with death and extinction may underpin their resilience. Her voice is soft, the translator rendering her thoughts with a quiet clarity. She isn't judging. She's observing. She points out that most species shy away from their past failures. They bury them, mourn them, try to forget the pain. Humans, she suggests, do the opposite. They dig up their failures. They study them. They put them in museums and make movies about them. They stare directly into the abyss, and instead of looking away, they take notes. It's a startling thought, that staring into the abyss might be a source of strength. Not a weakness, not a morbidity, a strategy, a way of learning from the worst that can happen so you can avoid it, or survive it, or at least understand it. The idea hangs in the air, a new lens through which to view the entire confusing afternoon. It reframes Jake's bizarre hobby from a quirk into a potential survival trait. It suggests that humanity's comfort with death might be the very thing that makes them so tenaciously alive. Jake recognizes a subtle shift in how he's perceived. The tension has gone from the postures of his classmates. The wide-eyed stares of terror have been replaced by looks of cautious, bewildered interest. He's not a monster to them anymore. He's an oddity. A fascinating, confusing, slightly terrifying oddity. He sees them watching him and he knows they're not afraid of him now. They're trying to figure him out. It's a definite improvement. He is a representative of a species that is somehow both terrifying and fascinating. The two ideas are no longer mutually exclusive. The aliens can hold both in their minds at once. They can be unsettled by the idea of a culture that builds theme parks around ancient predators, and also respect a culture that has the sheer audacity to do such a thing. They see the darkness and the curiosity woven together and they can't untangle them, and maybe they don't want to. The story ends not with punishment, but with a promise of deeper understanding. There are no expulsions, no trials, no diplomatic sanctions. There's just a classroom full of beings who have had their horizons violently expanded. They came to learn about coexistence from a textbook. They ended up learning it from a live demonstration. The lesson was messy, confusing, and deeply uncomfortable. But it was real. The galaxy got a lot stranger and a lot more interesting today. The neat, orderly map of civilized behavior that Professor Kelver had been teaching now has a big, messy, human-shaped splotch on it. A territory marked "Here be dinosaurs," and everyone in the room is now secretly, reluctantly, a little bit curious about what else might be out there, waiting to be misunderstood. Professor Kelver is already making notes for next semester. The classroom is mostly empty now. The security team has left. The students have filed out, chatting in hushed, bewildered tones. He stands alone at his lectern, his four eyes scanning the room where his lesson plan just exploded. His purple velvet skin seems to absorb the leftover tension in the air. He's humbled. He almost caused an interstellar incident by failing to ask a simple clarifying question. But he's also energized. A good academic knows a teaching opportunity when it hits them in the face. Even if it hits like a freight train. His entire syllabus on coexistence needs a new chapter. Several, actually. The old one was theoretical. It dealt with broad philosophies and historical case studies from species that think more or less alike. It assumed a shared baseline of what constitutes life, death, and ethics. That assumption just crumbled to dust. He looks down at his datapad. He deletes the upcoming unit on interspecies conflict resolution. It feels insufficient now, childishly simple. He will rewrite his xenobiology curriculum to include explicit discussions of human culture, not as a footnote, as a core module. He needs a whole section just on semantic landmines, words that sound innocent but carry atomic payloads of misunderstanding. He'll have to build exercises around them. Role-playing scenarios where students have to explain their most normal habits and see how they sound to outsiders. It's going to be a nightmare to grade. He'll add modules on the potential for misreadings across civilizations. Not just language barriers, context barriers, timescale barriers. The fact that one culture's ancient history is another's current event. He needs to teach students how to ask, "What do you mean by that?" before they call security. How to assume ignorance before assuming malice. It's a fundamental shift in approach. It turns xenobiology from a science into a detective game. The incident will become a legendary case study in cross-cultural communication at Galactic U. He can already see it. The Morrison misunderstanding. It will be taught in first-year seminars for decades. A perfect example of how things can go wrong even when everyone is trying to be polite. How the most advanced translation tech is useless without cultural context. It will be his legacy, not the books he wrote on moral philosophy. The day he almost had a student arrested over a fossil. The payoff is the transformation of a near catastrophe into a foundational teaching tool. He took a classroom on the brink of a diplomatic disaster and steered it toward a guest lecture. He turned panic into pedagogy. It's the kind of recovery they don't teach you in professor school. You either have the instinct for it or you don't. Today he found out he does. Jake's confession didn't break the class. It became its most important lesson. The 30 minutes of sheer unadulterated terror everyone just experienced is now the core text. The fear, the confusion, the dawning realization. That's the syllabus now. It's more valuable than any lecture on theory. It's real. It's messy. It's unforgettable. The galaxy, Kelver reflects, was a much stranger place than any textbook prepared him for. The textbooks are clean. They have charts and graphs and clear definitions. Reality is a tangled, confusing, glorious mess. It's full of species that dig up their dead and make movies about them. It's full of students who can upend your entire worldview by being enthusiastically themselves, and that, he realizes, is exactly why his job is never boring. He thought he was here to teach answers. He's realizing his real job is to navigate the questions. The big, weird, unanswerable questions that arise when 12 different types of consciousness try to share a room. He closes his datapad. The new syllabus can wait. For now, he just enjoys the quiet hum of the classroom, a space that nearly became a courtroom and instead became something better, a place that learned something today, himself included. The security team is reeling. They've abandoned their investigation, but the confusion remains. The threat of a galactic incident has passed, but a deeper, more philosophical problem has taken its place. They need to understand the why. Why would any species devote so much energy to this? Why dig up the long dead? The question isn't accusatory anymore. It's pure, bewildered curiosity. The officers look at Jake, their professional demeanor replaced by the expression of tourists who've stumbled into a very strange local custom. Zara, the jellyfish-like student, finally breaks the silence. Her bioluminescence has settled into a slow, puzzled pulse. Her voice, when it comes through the translator, is soft, tinged with a new, dawning horror. Not the horror of violence, but the horror of profound, incomprehensible strangeness. She asks the question everyone is thinking. You study dead things for recreational purposes. It's not an accusation of a crime anymore. It's an accusation of being deeply, profoundly weird. It's the kind of question you ask when you discover someone collects antique dental equipment or spends their weekends reenacting historical tax law disputes. It's a judgment on his character, not his legality. Jake partially corrects her. Educational purposes mostly, he says. He's trying to be precise. He's an academic, after all. He wants to clarify that it's a legitimate scientific field, not just a hobby. He talks about advancing knowledge, understanding planetary history, piecing together the story of life itself. It's a noble defense. It almost makes it sound normal. Almost, but then he acknowledges the popular fascination. He can't help himself. He's the evangelist for his passion. He wants them to get it, to feel the excitement he feels. He admits that, yeah, for a lot of people it's also for fun. The thrill of the find. The adventure of it. He says it with a shrug and a smile, like he's talking about a popular sport. He doesn't see how this admission lands. He thinks he's building a bridge. He's actually making the canyon wider. He mentions the cultural touchstone, the thing he thinks will explain everything. He assumes this is a universal reference, a piece of media so iconic it transcends species. He looks at a room full of horrified aliens, at the security officers who just tried to arrest him, at the professor who called them, and he says the words that will either clarify everything or make it all so much weirder. He says, like Jurassic Park? The silence that follows is different. It's not the frozen horror from before. It's not the confused silence of the failed interrogation. This is the silence of utter, complete bafflement. The words Jurassic Park mean absolutely nothing to them. The reference doesn't translate. It's not in their databases. It's a blank. They stare at him. They wait for an explanation. What is a Jurassic Park? Is it a preserve? A hunting ground? A museum? A festival? He has just invoked the one thing he thought would make it all make sense, and it has instead rendered him completely inexplicable. He's not a criminal. He's not a scholar. He's a person who just referenced a movie nobody has ever heard of to explain why he likes looking at rocks. The aliens look at each other. The security officers slowly put their recorders away. There is no form for this. There is no procedure. They are in uncharted territory, and the guide is babbling about a park. Now the aliens have a new problem to process. Humanity's imagination. The conversation widens from a specific incident to a species-wide quirk. The immediate legal threat is gone, replaced by a deeper cultural unease. The security officers aren't trying to build a case anymore. They're trying to understand a psychology so foreign it might as well be from another dimension, which technically it is. They thought they were dealing with a criminal. Now they're dealing with a culture that treats its most dangerous history as entertainment. The officers confront the idea that humans fantasize about recreating apex predators. Jake, eager to explain Jurassic Park now that he's sparked some interest, describes the basic plot. He talks about scientists bringing dinosaurs back to life through genetic engineering. He describes theme parks, family attractions, the wonder of seeing these creatures up close. He thinks he's describing a thrilling adventure story. He's describing their worst nightmare. They entertain themselves with simulations of their planet's most dangerous history. Jake mentions movies, video games, and amusement park rides. He talks about how popular these things are, how kids love dinosaurs, how everyone knows what a T-Rex is. He describes the excitement, the special effects, the thrill of the chase. He's painting a picture of a society that is collectively fascinated by the very monsters that once ruled their world. It's a science fiction fantasy, but its popularity reveals a real human impulse. The aliens aren't judging the science, they're judging the desire. The fact that this is a common, mainstream form of entertainment is what stuns them. It's not a niche interest for specialists. It's a cultural touchstone. The idea of deliberately resurrecting the most terrifying predators from your planet's past, not to study them in a secure lab, but to put them in a park for people to look at, is a level of audacity they find both horrifying and incomprehensible. The aliens are grappling with a culture that uses the past as a theme park. Their own histories are treated with solemn reverence, often as cautionary tales. They build memorials to their mistakes. They mourn their lost species. Humans, it seems, build roller coasters. They sell plush toys of their extinct megafauna. They turn ancient nightmares into a fun day out for the family. The disconnect is absolute. It's not just a difference of opinion. It's a difference of soul. The humor and horror blend into something uniquely unsettling. The security officers look at each other. One of them mutters something about containment protocols. Another just shakes his head slowly. The initial fear has been replaced by a kind of weary astonishment. They came here prepared for a monster and found a species of charming, reckless children playing with conceptual fire. The threat isn't malice. It's a complete lack of common sense wrapped in boundless curiosity. The payoff is the shift from fearing human violence to being baffled by human curiosity. The investigation is definitively over. The recorders are off. The official postures are dropped. The security team is no longer conducting an interrogation. They're just a group of confused individuals trying to understand a very strange day at the office. They are having a conversation, not taking a statement. Now it's just a very strange cultural exchange. Jake is happily explaining the different types of dinosaurs, their diets, their sizes. The aliens are listening with a kind of horrified fascination. Professor Kelver has sunk into his chair, his four eyes watching the whole thing unfold with a sort of academic exhaustion. He's already thinking about how to write this up in a paper. The security officers aren't sure if they should file a report or just ask for a movie night. One of them, the one whose brow furrowed first, actually asks Jake if this Jurassic Park is available with subtitles. He says it not as a joke. He says it with genuine, cautious curiosity. He wants to see this thing for himself. He needs to understand what kind of mind dreams this stuff up. The lead officer makes a note to requisition a copy for cultural research purposes. The paperwork for that will be a lot easier to explain than the paperwork for an arrest. Jake beams. He's finally getting through to them. He starts recommending the director's cut. Professor Kelver watches the security officers pack up their recorders. The immediate threat is gone, but the air is thick with unresolved tension and lingering embarrassment. He stands there, a scholar who just presided over a classroom disaster that nearly became an interstellar incident. His four eyes take in the scene, the confused officers, the unsettled students, and Jake, who is still buzzing with enthusiasm about fossil dating techniques. Kelver is a professor of coexistence. His entire life's work is about finding common ground, and in this mess he sees it. The teaching moment isn't just immense. It's the entire point of his profession. He has to pivot from accusing a student of war crimes to offering him a platform. It's a staggering shift in tone. One minute he was ready to have the human expelled and tried in a galactic court. The next he's realizing this human is a walking, talking textbook on a subject his curriculum completely ignores. He clears his throat. The sound is small in the quiet room. All eyes and eye-like sensory organs turn to him. He has to choose his words with more care than he ever has in his career. He proposes a constructive outcome, a chance to rewrite the curriculum right here, right now. He doesn't apologize. That would make it about his mistake. Instead, he makes it about the opportunity. He talks about the value of first-hand accounts. He mentions the importance of diverse perspectives in xenobiology. He's reframing the catastrophe as a unique learning experience. It's a masterclass in academic recovery. He offers Jake a guest lecture spot to explain human paleontological practices. He makes it formal. He doesn't ask, he offers. It's an invitation from a professor to a student. acknowledging the student has something vital to teach. He suggests a special seminar, an addendum to the current unit on ethical preservation. He wants Jake to explain in detail what his people actually do and why. Jake's face lights up. He's not being expelled. He's being given a presentation slot. The fear, the confusion, the strange tension of the last hour, it all vanishes from his expression. He's just a student who's been asked to present on his favorite topic. His posture straightens. The nervous energy transforms into excited energy. He's been waiting for this his whole life. He immediately starts offering to bring fossil casts and discuss geological timescales. He's already planning the lesson. He talks about bringing replicas of T-Rex teeth, segments of trilobites, maybe a cross-section of petrified wood. He wants to do hands-on demonstrations. He's mapping out the entire hour in his head, a whirlwind tour of deep time. He's not just accepting the offer, he's expanding it. He promises a field trip vibe, which probably sounds terrifying to the aliens. To him, it means an engaging, interactive session. To everyone else in the room who just spent the last hour thinking he was a prolific hunter of living creatures, the phrase field trip has very different connotations. They hear it and imagine being taken to a site of mass extinction. There's a collective subtle flinch. Zara's bioluminescence flickers nervously, but they don't object. They're too curious and too polite. The scene reframes conflict into collaboration. What was minutes ago a catastrophic misunderstanding is now a scheduled seminar. The potential for a diplomatic disaster has been funneled into an academic exercise. Professor Kelver has taken a room on the brink of chaos and steered it back toward its original purpose: learning. It's a neat trick, turning a near disaster into a teachable moment. The potential interstellar incident is now a lesson plan. The security officers look relieved. Their paperwork just got a lot simpler. They don't have to write a report on attempted genocide. They can write a note about a cultural and linguistic misunderstanding that was peacefully resolved through dialogue and education. It sounds much better. It might even get them a commendation. They give Professor Kelver a respectful nod before they leave. They're happy to let the academics handle it from here. Jake is already scribbling notes for his presentation, completely unaware that he was seconds away from a very different kind of itinerary. Meanwhile, back at Galactic Security Headquarters, Commander Zix has a paperwork problem. The security team has radioed in a preliminary report, and it makes absolutely no sense. The initial alert was for a potential Class 3 sentient rights violation, which carries a specific set of forms, protocols, and mandatory legal reviews. The update suggests the incident is not that. The forms for not that do not exist. His desk is a monument to galactic bureaucracy, and now he has to fit a square peg into a universe of round holes. The system is not designed for ambiguity. The security team must officially close their investigation. They can't just leave it open. An open file implies an ongoing threat, which could trigger diplomatic alerts, travel advisories, all sorts of unnecessary panic. They have to put a label on what just happened and file it away. The problem is finding the right label. The standard categories are clear: violation, infraction, misunderstanding, cultural quirk. The first two imply fault. The last two do not. The team's report lands on his terminal. He reads it twice, then a third time. The tension here isn't about danger. It's about taxonomy. How do you categorize an activity that isn't a crime? Just a massive misunderstanding. There's no drop-down menu for accused of genocide due to interest in rocks. The incident doesn't fit the definitions of assault, theft, or ecological tampering. None of the verbs align. The actions described, digging, brushing, cataloging, are not illegal acts. They're just deeply, profoundly strange when viewed through the wrong lens. They consider labels like cultural xenological interest in planetary history. The phrase is a mouthful. It's the kind of term a committee invents when they need to describe something without actually describing it. It's vague enough to be harmless, specific enough to sound official. They try it out. It almost works. But it doesn't capture the sheer scale of the confusion. The fact that two officers drew their formal interrogator pads over a debate about fossilization techniques. They try to fit human paleontology within the narrow boxes of galactic law. Is it a science? An art form? A hobby? A form of historical reenactment? Each category has its own subclauses and regulatory frameworks. The science category requires proof of peer review. The hobby category requires a permit if it involves specialized equipment. The historical reenactment category has strict rules about public displays of simulated violence. Nothing fits. The activity is, legally speaking, a ghost. The process underscores how fragile communication is when contexts collide. The entire galactic legal system is built on shared assumptions. It assumes that when someone says hunt, they mean the pursuit of living prey. It assumes trophy means a spoil of victory. It has no framework for a culture that applies those words to the study of mineralized skeletons. The near disaster wasn't a failure of law. It was a failure of dictionary. The report they file will be a masterpiece of bureaucratic confusion. It will cite cross-cultural semantic divergence and non-malicious intent. It will recommend enhanced pre-contact cultural briefings for all human exchange programs. The conclusion will be a paragraph of carefully worded nonsense that essentially says, "We thought it was one thing, but it was another, and now we are confused." Will be studied in administrative training courses for years as an example of how weird first contact can get. The payoff is the pure comic relief of watching a rigid system try to process something entirely new. Commander Zix finally selects a classification from the menu. Resolved cultural incident, no further action. It's the closest thing he's got. He files the report. The system accepts it. The case is closed. He leans back in his chair and wonders if he needs to request a new category be created. He decides against it. The paperwork for that would be even worse. Back in the classroom, Jake, now a minor celebrity, teases about showing photos of the La Brea tar pits. He describes them as natural traps, places where ancient creatures got stuck and were preserved. He makes it sound fascinating. The aliens, still grappling with the new reality, listen with a mix of horror and curiosity. The idea of a pit of sticky black goo that devours animals and turns them into exhibits is the kind of thing their nightmares are made of. The classroom dissolves into curious, nervous chatter about extinct life. The fear is gone, replaced by a tentative, bewildered fascination. Students are asking questions. What did they eat? How big were they? Why did they disappear? It's no longer an inquisition. It's a seminar. The bureaucratic confusion in a distant office has sealed the deal. The incident is officially over. Now it's just a really strange story they'll all tell for the rest of their lives. The security team is reeling. They've abandoned their investigation, but the confusion remains. The threat of a galactic incident has passed, but a deeper, more philosophical problem has taken its place. They need to understand the why. Why would any species devote so much energy to this? Why dig up the long dead? The question isn't accusatory anymore. It's pure bewildered curiosity. The officers look at Jake, their professional demeanor replaced by the expression of tourists who've stumbled into a very strange local custom. Zara, the jellyfish-like student, finally breaks the silence. Her bioluminescence has settled into a slow, puzzled pulse. Her voice, when it comes through the translator, is soft, tinged with a new, dawning horror. Not the horror of violence, but the horror of profound, incomprehensible strangeness. She asks the question everyone is thinking. You study dead things for recreational purposes? It's not an accusation of a crime anymore. It's an accusation of being deeply, profoundly weird. It's the kind of question you ask when you discover someone collects antique dental equipment or spends their weekends reenacting historical tax law disputes. It's a judgment on his character, not his legality. Jake partially corrects her. Educational purposes mostly, he says. He's trying to be precise. He's an academic, after all. He wants to clarify that it's a legitimate scientific field, not just a hobby. He talks about advancing knowledge, understanding planetary history, piecing together the story of life itself. It's a noble defense. It almost makes it sound normal. Almost. But then he acknowledges the popular fascination. He can't help himself. He's an evangelist for his passion. He wants them to get it, to feel the excitement he feels. He admits that, yeah, for a lot of people, it's also for fun. The thrill of the find. The adventure of it. He says it with a shrug and a smile like he's talking about a popular sport. He doesn't see how this admission lands. He thinks he's building a bridge. He's actually making the canyon wider. He mentions the cultural touchstone. The thing he thinks will explain everything. He assumes this is a universal reference. A piece of media so iconic it transcends species. He looks at a room full of horrified aliens, at the security officers who just tried to arrest him, at the professor who called them, and he says the words that will either clarify everything or make it all so much weirder. He says, you know, like Jurassic Park? The silence that follows is different. It's not the frozen horror from before. It's not the confused silence of the failed interrogation. This is the silence of utter, complete bafflement. The words Jurassic Park mean absolutely nothing to them. The reference doesn't translate. It's not in their databases. It's a blank. They stare at him. They wait for an explanation. What is a Jurassic Park? Is it a preserve? A hunting ground? A museum? A festival? He has just invoked the one thing he thought would make it all make sense, and it has instead rendered him completely inexplicable. He's not a criminal. He's not a scholar. He's a person who just referenced a movie nobody has ever heard of to explain why he likes looking at rocks. The aliens look at each other. The security officers slowly put their recorders away. There is no form for this. There is no procedure. They are in uncharted territory and the guide is babbling about a park. Now the aliens have a new problem to process. Humanity's imagination. The conversation widens from a specific incident to a species-wide quirk. The immediate legal threat is gone, replaced by a deeper cultural unease. The security officers aren't trying to build a case anymore. They're trying to understand a psychology so foreign it might as well be from another dimension, which technically it is. They thought they were dealing with a criminal. Now they're dealing with a culture that treats its most dangerous history as entertainment. The officers confront the idea that humans fantasize about recreating apex predators. Jake, eager to explain Jurassic Park now that he's sparked some interest, describes the basic plot. He talks about scientists bringing dinosaurs back to life through genetic engineering. He describes theme parks, family attractions, the wonder of seeing these creatures up close. He thinks he's describing a thrilling adventure story. He's describing their worst nightmare. They entertain themselves with simulations of their planet's most dangerous history. Jake mentions movies, video games, and amusement park rides. He talks about how popular these things are, how kids love dinosaurs, how everyone knows what a T-Rex is. He describes the excitement, the special effects, the thrill of the chase. He's painting a picture of a society that is collectively fascinated by the very monsters that once ruled their world. It's a science fiction fantasy, but its popularity reveals a real human impulse. The aliens aren't judging the science. They're judging the desire. The fact that this is a common, mainstream form of entertainment is what stuns them. It's not a niche interest for specialists. It's a cultural touchstone. The idea of deliberately resurrecting the most terrifying predators from your planet's past, not to study them in a secure lab, but to put them in a park for people to look at, is a level of audacity they find both horrifying and incomprehensible. The aliens are grappling with a culture that uses the past as a theme park. Their own histories are treated with solemn reverence, often as cautionary tales. They build memorials to their mistakes. They mourn their lost species. Humans, it seems, build roller coasters. They sell plush toys of their extinct megafauna. They turn ancient nightmares into a fun day out for the family. The disconnect is absolute. It's not just a difference of opinion. It's a difference of soul. The humor and horror blend into something uniquely unsettling. The security officers look at each other. One of them mutters something about containment protocols. Another just shakes his head slowly. The initial fear has been replaced by a kind of weary astonishment. They came here prepared for a monster and found a species of charming, reckless children playing with conceptual fire. The threat isn't malice. It's a complete lack of common sense wrapped in boundless curiosity. The payoff is the shift from fearing human violence to being baffled by human curiosity. The investigation is definitively over. The recorders are off. The official postures are dropped. The security team is no longer conducting an interrogation. They're just a group of confused individuals trying to understand a very strange day at the office. They are having a conversation, not taking a statement. Now it's just a very strange cultural exchange. Jake is happily explaining the different types of dinosaurs, their diets, their sizes. The aliens are listening with a kind of horrified fascination. Professor Kelver has sunk into his chair, his four eyes watching the whole thing unfold with a sort of academic exhaustion. He's already thinking about how to write this up in a paper. The security officers aren't sure if they should file a report or just ask for a movie night. One of them, the one whose brow furrowed first, actually asks Jake if this Jurassic Park is available with subtitles. He says it not as a joke. He says it with genuine, cautious curiosity. He wants to see this thing for himself. He needs to understand what kind of mind dreams this stuff up. The lead officer makes a note to requisition a copy for cultural research purposes. The paperwork for that will be a lot easier to explain than the paperwork for an arrest. Jake beams. He's finally getting through to them. He starts recommending the director's cut.